everyone, and welcome back to my channel True Crime and Trials, and today I'm going to be covering day one of the Anthony Pardon trial. So we start with prosecution's opening statements, and he starts by saying Rachel had spoke to her mum at 6:30 p.m. and then at around 9:50 p.m. a friend texted Rachel and then attempted to call her with no response to the calls or the texts. And obviously after she'd spoke to her mum that Rachel was never seen alive again. It was a co-worker that went to her apartment to check on her. There was no answer, and the landlord checked inside her apartment, and obviously she didn't check in anything. She just had a quick scan around the rooms and didn't see Rachel in there. Anthony Pardon's phone actually shows that he was at Rachel's apartment from 7:59 p.m. until about 9:25 p.m. And then he starts talking about what state Rachel's body was found in. She was found bound and gagged, hogtied, raped and murdered. Awful. Anthony's DNA was found in Rachel's vagina, and also epithelial DNA was found on her, which is skin cells. She was hogtied with a curling iron and a hairdryer, and Anthony's DNA was found on both of those. Nobody else's DNA was found. There was also male DNA found under Rachel's fingernails, but there wasn't enough to test to find out whose DNA it was. It was just enough to know it was male DNA. Also, a credit card was taken and was attempted to be used in 7 locations, and surveillance footage shows that Anthony's sister was also using the credit card as well as him. So next on to the defence opening statements, and this was very strange. He just addressed the jury very loudly about them being unbiased and not emotional, about evidence being shown and their thought process and decision making. So, but before this trial even got started, Anthony wanted to get rid of his attorneys and represent himself, but obviously went back on that. So I don't know if he doesn't like his attorneys, or he doesn't get on with them, or he doesn't have faith in them. I don't know. So we start with the state's first witness, which is Trent Snyder. He doesn't want to be filmed or photographed, and he works at the funeral home with Rachel. And it was his office manager that rang him while he was out on the road working to go and check on Rachel, because obviously she hadn't turned up at work. He got there, knocked on the door, and there was no answer. He saw that there was a lit candle in the living room. So he went to the complex office and spoke to the landlord, and the landlord went in and to check, and she couldn't see Rachel. Obviously she only did a quick scan, she didn't check in any cupboards or closets or anything, and she blew the candle out on her way out. So when the landlord came out and said she's not there, Trent was even more worried and called 911. He also noticed that Rachel's car wasn't parked outside her apartment like it normally was. It was actually parked around the corner, which he found very odd. So the cross-examination, the notes that I took for that was determined that the apartment was locked when the landlord went to go inside the apartment. Trent knew where Rachel lived because he'd actually taken her car to the garage to get new tyres. The funeral home had actually paid for Rachel to get 4 new tyres on her car and asked Trent to take the car to the garage to do so because Rachel was sick at the time. So on to the next witness, which is Lisa Richardson. She doesn't want to be filmed or photographed either, and she is the manager at the apartment complex where Rachel lived, which is called Cardinal Crossing. They show pictures of Rachel's apartment, and hers is apartment letter B, and there's a picture of the actual candle that was burning at the time. She said she just had a quick look round. She didn't look in any closets or anything, and she informed the police she couldn't find Rachel in there. And again, another friend of Rachel's turned up, and they actually go back into the apartment again, and he finds Rachel, screams, and runs out of the apartment again. And that's when law enforcement go in, and she says there was no sign of forced entry into either the front or the back door, and there was no sign of any broken windows. The cross-examination, the owners of the apartment complex had spoken to Lisa and asked her not to speak about the case until the trial. She no longer works for that company, and she worked at that complex for 3 years. She'd never seen Anthony Pardon before. So on to the third witness, which is Jonathan Kennedy. This is a long testimony, so I'll get through it as quick as I can. He doesn't want to be filmed or photographed either, and he knew Rachel from years ago when they were kids. She was friends with his sister, and it was him and Rachel's brother John and a few others that got together to organise her birthday party on the 28th of January 2018. And Rachel's brother actually stayed with Rachel at her apartment over that weekend. When John left Rachel's apartment after the party, he actually took her only key with him. So obviously when she went out, she couldn't get back in, and the only people that had a spare key were Jonathan and his wife at the time, Cindy. So she called Jonathan to arrange to go pick up that key, which she did. Then later on, Jonathan's wife Cindy tried to call Rachel to see if everything was okay, and she got no answer, which made her very concerned. So she spoke to Jonathan, and he'd actually spoken to a co-worker of Rachel's, and she had told him, no, it was he told Jonathan that a co-worker had been to the apartment and there was no answer. So he kept trying to call Rachel, but obviously got no answer. And he called Rachel's ex-boyfriend, Sean, to get permission. He obviously went down to the apartments to check. He obviously didn't have right of entry, so he spoke to the landlady, and she had to ring Sean, whose name was on the lease also, and he agreed to give permission to Sean to go in and look around the apartment. He checked downstairs, went upstairs. He says he noticed that there was a Marilyn Monroe picture missing. And then obviously he went into the bedroom, opened the closet, and actually found Rachel dead in there. He screamed. I mean, he's crying while he's speaking about this, and obviously he's traumatised from what he saw and obviously heartbroken. He ran downstairs and told law enforcement what he'd seen and that he tried to help her, but obviously he knew that she was no longer alive. They show a picture of the kitchen where Rachel's birthday cake was, and Jonathan said that birthday cake being left out on the kitchen top was very unlike Rachel, and she's obviously the type of person to put these kind of things away in the fridge or wherever. So there's a picture of the closet of when he went into the apartment to check on her, and he also says that Rachel always parked her car outside her apartment, so it was totally out of character for the car to be parked around the corner. He says at the party they smoked marijuana, and Rachel also kept marijuana at home in a jar, and Jonathan says that was also missing. So we go on to the cross-examination. So he asks Jonathan if anyone at the party did Molly, which is pure ecstasy. And Jonathan says no one at the party was taking anything like that. It was just marijuana. There was no acid. But Jonathan has previously taken acid and Molly in 2018, just not at that party. He has only been to Rachel's apartment once before on his own, and she wasn't there. He went there to fix a fish tank. Since Rachel's passing, he has lost weight and improved his life, had his hair cut, things like that. He still smokes marijuana but doesn't take anything else. The defence show a picture of Jonathan with his ex-wife before he lost all the weight and things. I'm not sure what the point is of this. The death of Rachel caused the breakdown of his marriage, and he and his wife are no longer together. He did actually fear for Rachel because of the area she lived in. Said it was a very bad area. And then the defence pick up on the fact that he hadn't actually spoken to the detectives at the time and told them about the missing Marilyn Monroe picture, and the defence attorney was trying to get at him for only speaking up about this now. He now shows a picture of some scales that Jonathan had given Rachel to weigh out marijuana. There was some animosity between him and the landlady on the day that they found Rachel. He had told Rachel to move out of the apartment complex because of the creepy guy next door, and I think there was dealers a bit further down. He says it was a bad neighbourhood. Jonathan is now into photography, but wasn't at the time of Rachel's birthday party and didn't take any photos of the party. And now the defence mentions people called Angel and Jason Williams. Angel was Rachel's friend and Jason is Angel's husband. They don't talk further on this, so I'm not sure if they're going to be brought up later or not, but I thought I'd make a note just in case it does come up. I don't know what part they're playing in this, but... Now they talk about Jonathan's interview, and he said that he thought whoever did this was waiting for Rachel at her apartment. So the defence obviously say, well, what makes you think that? And Jonathan just says it's something that I believe happened. And then they talk about Jonathan's phone records, and it shows that he dialed the same number 50 times that night of the party. And he said it was either Ryan or Justin Weber, and they were actually at the party, but they had left. But Jonathan was very, very drunk that night and was laid on the floor, so he doesn't remember why he was trying to call them. So then we go back to the prosecution's redirect, and on the night of the party, some of them left and went to a club, but Jonathan didn't, as he was too drunk and unconscious. He isn't sure if the Marilyn Monroe picture was missing or misplaced. He just saw that it wasn't in the place it should have been. And Jonathan says that they did try and get some Molly for the party, but they were unable to get any. He can't remember giving any DNA to police on the day that Rachel was found. He has been in Rachel's car before. On Rachel's coffee table in her living room, it's got obviously the weighing scales, and it does have some blunts on there, and those blunts that are on the table were rolled by Jonathan because Rachel couldn't roll them. So now we're back to recross from the defence, and to Jonathan's knowledge, he doesn't think anybody else had taken any drugs other than marijuana. But obviously he was very drunk, so he doesn't know everything that went on at that party. So witness 4 for day 1 is Frank Sclafani. He's works at Columbus Police Department, and he's been at the police department for 14 years. He was working on the 29th of January 2018, and he was called out to do a welfare check on Rachel. When he arrived, other officers were already on scene when he got there, and obviously they didn't have probable cause to break down the door. I mean, there was obviously a concern, but not enough for them to kick the door in. So he went and spoke to the landlord, and she contacted Sean, the ex-boyfriend, whose name was on the lease, to get permission for them to enter. So Frank waited outside while Lisa and Jonathan went in to check, and then... Oh, hang on. No, it was the landlord that went in, and she couldn't find anything, and at the time Frank said, well, there's nothing more we could do. So then a bit later on, Frank ended up hearing a shout out over the radio about going back to the complex, so he went back. He actually spoke to Rachel's mother, who was extremely concerned. So he requested a cell phone ping on Rachel's phone to see where it was. So then, obviously, the landlord and Jonathan go back in again, and Jonathan comes out screaming. So Frank is the one that went up the stairs to find Rachel. Frank was wearing a body cam at the time, so they show initial photos and then they play the body cam footage, and we only see up to where he's going up the stairs, and then, you know, it obviously cuts off because us as viewers can't see that stuff, but obviously the jury do. And Frank was looking down at this point. He couldn't see it either. He says he saw no indication of life, and she was bound and gagged, and there was something over her head as well as her neck, which was attached to the doorknob. He called for medical professionals because obviously he's not medically trained to pronounce her dead, and he called for backup from more law enforcement. They now show a picture of the Marilyn Monroe picture, and it's actually at the top of the stairs. And he also saw no signs of forced entry. There is a cross-examination, but it only brings up that he had his body cam on recording the first time he went also. So that's the end of day 1. Very, very interesting case. Very sad and horrific for anyone to die that way. I mean, it's awful, and obviously we know there's DNA evidence showing that Anthony did this. Obviously, I think sorry about that. I don't know if it's something that is with these recorders, and they'll only let you record so much. It cut off again. So basically, I was just saying that I think the defence is just working towards Anthony Pardon not getting the death penalty. So we will see. I will be back with day 2 soon. So until then, bye for now.